So I am going to stop sharing my screen and introduce you to our guest speaker and the rest of the student wellness team. And so that's myself, Francesca Newman. We have Tiffany Simon and Tammy Johnson. And also Ty Hobbs is our director. And then our guest speaker tonight is Ashley Taylor.
Hi, everybody. It's a little different, obviously, that I can't see y'all, but at least I see faces. So I'm talking to humans, so that's nice. But my name is Ashley Taylor, and I'm a social worker at Heights Family Counseling out in the Houston Heights. So basically, my job there, I wear several hats, but essentially, I'm resource connection. I do a lot of outreach in the community. I work with a lot of schools and local organizations, just basically connecting people to the things that they are in need of, which is essentially my job here today. So,
Great. Thank you so much. So now we are going to jump into the presentation. I'm going to share screen, so I'm going to click along. So if you hear her asking next or making like a ding, you'll know it's because we're moving on in the slide.
okay, so basically, yeah, I work at Heights Family Counseling, which is a counseling practice in the Heights. And I obviously work very closely with the people there. A lot of people call in asking for services, obviously, such as, a therapist. And throughout my time working there and also working in schools, I've noticed that there is a need to guide people along in the process of finding a therapist. For some people it is second nature, very easy to do, and for a lot of people it's just, if you're not in the field, it's, you don't know what you're asking. I like the quote, you don't know what you don't know, and I think that that's very true. You don't know how to seek out information if you don't know what you're looking for. So my job here today is really just to guide y'all along in the process of how to find a therapist, and just the groundwork behind, or I guess the behind the scenes of seeking out a therapist and what that looks like. Um, so since I have you here, obviously you've set the time aside to better understand how to access therapy and what that process will look like. And I'm really glad to have all of you here, even though I can't see your faces. I am very glad that you're here, and I'm hopeful that the information that I provide will be of use to you and possibly to people in your circle. And like she said, that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So if anyone has any questions, you can drop them in there and I'll get to them if I see them pop up at any time. Or like she said, there's a moderator, so I don't know who's going to answer the questions, but either way, your questions will be answered. And also, if you have more specific questions that you don't want to put into the Q&A box because it is for everybody to see, I will provide my email address as well, and you guys can reach out to me individually, and I will be more than willing to answer your questions. So we'll get right into it. We'll start with the making the decision bubble here. So you've obviously already made the decision that you possibly want to seek out therapy, or you're just wanting to expand your knowledge about what the therapeutic process looks like. And I just want to say, good for you guys for doing that. Sometimes it is, we have like internal feelings about seeking out this information, and I just want to clear the air about that and make sure that all y'all are comfortable with this decision and being here with me today, because I appreciate that you're here. And therapy, but for what, right? So when we want to seek out therapy, the whole point, and there's people that do the work, so you don't necessarily need to know what you want therapy for. Therapy doesn't need to be preventative. It doesn't need to be reactive. It can be preventative in nature. So you don't need to wait until the house is on fire to, be able to put it out. But if you notice any signs that things could be, going askew, therapy is a great option. Sorry, I might need to take some or drink some water through this as well. So I apologize for that. But it sounds silly that you don't know what you need there, or you might not need to know what you need therapy for, but that's exactly why there's professionals that can guide you along that process. There's also a lot of misconceptions. If you want to click on that bubble. There's a lot of misconceptions about therapy and what therapy can be sought out for. And like I said, you don't need to be in crisis to go to therapy. Therapy can benefit you and your child by keeping you out of crisis. So, just like in the school systems, I'm sure parents have heard this before, but like early intervention, therapy can be in the same way. But with that being said, you can also be in crisis to seek out therapy. So, I mean, I just wanted to make it clear that there's really no, right time to enter therapy or think that, this is the time that I need to go. Um, there's a lot of stigma around therapy and just like the mental health field in general. And there's about a lot of preconceived ideas about therapy and the type of people who seek out therapy. But truthfully, therapy is for everyone. I always say anyone and everyone can benefit from therapy. And desiring therapy is not necessarily a weakness and doesn't mean you failed as a person or a parent. I think this would be the next bubble, if I'm not mistaken. This just means that you're acknowledging a gap within what you can provide for your child and what your child needs. There's many things that we're good at as individuals. We all have our strengths. Just because you are not able to address the concerns that you have with your child on your own does not mean that you are any less valuable as a parent. It just means you're being resourceful. We all have our strengths, like I said, and there are people, as previously mentioned, that specifically work in these areas. So it makes sense that we take advantage of what these people have to offer. People who provide therapeutic services have a level of expertise that us as parents might not have, and that's perfectly okay. There's also just something about a third party that has really no interest in proving a point either way. They're simply there to serve you, and I want to highlight this because it's very important, and I'm going to bring it up throughout the presentation, is that they are there to serve you. So just keep that in mind as we go throughout this presentation. So we're going to go to the groundwork bubble now. So, while the first step to seeking out therapy is really, the desire to seek out therapy, there's a lot of barriers that kind of get in the way of following through with the process. So, even if you internally acknowledge that this might be a step that you would like to take, there is just a lot of things that might get in the way of doing that. So, we're going to go through the lack of knowledge part. There are many different types of people who provide therapeutic services. And while many fall under the same umbrella, looking at the alphabet soup behind someone's name when you see their name maybe online or on a business card or whatever have you, it can be daunting. Like, what do these titles mean? Where do I go from here? Is this even the service that I need? Right. So, although this might seem overwhelming, I wanted to start here because this is really proving why these types of meetings are necessary. There's a lot of terminology that tends to get placed under the same umbrella, or people associate that these two things are the same thing, and they're actually not. And there are a lot of people who do a lot of different jobs to address specific matters. So the beauty of this is that you don't necessarily need to know exactly what it is your child needs, because when you call into places, they can direct you in in the correct direction. But it is good to have a knowledge of some basic titles, and I say this because I field phone calls at Heights Family Counseling as well, and I'll have people call in and they will ask, I want to see a psychiatrist, and they're using the word psychiatrist as psychologist, but they're not the same thing. So just knowing what it is you're seeking out so you don't get pointed in the wrong direction. And another situation I've had happen is like people will call in and ask for a therapist, and I'll refer to counselor, and they're like, no, but I don't want a counselor, I want a therapist. But those two words are very interchangeable while other titles might not be. So to the point about psychiatrists, these are people who specialize in the diagnosis and treatment of mental or psychiatric illnesses. They have medical training and they're licensed to prescribe medicines. So their main job is medication management. Some psychiatrists do offer talk therapy, but it is a rarity. Typically, they try to put all their eggs in one basket because it can get overwhelming when you're managing medication as well as doing talk therapy. So psychiatrists are people who manage medicine. And so when someone goes into a psychiatric appointment, it is usually just to get like a touch base appointment. How are your medicines working? Do we need to up the dosage, lessen the dosage? Is this not the correct medicine for you? Things of that nature. So I know it's very odd that the therapy and the psychiatry don't take place in the same place. But that is just the reality of just the different types of trainings that people have. Psychologists, they are of the doctoral level, so they can also diagnose as well. They're experts in psychology. They study the human mind and human behavior. They're also trained in counseling, psychotherapy, and sometimes psychological testing. So, if your child has ever had to go through a psychoeducational eval for school, maybe to get a diagnosis of some sort, psychologists sometimes do this work. Which can those evaluations can help uncover emotional problems that you may not realize that your child is dealing with. Cognitive behavioral therapy is psychologists' main treatment tool, which is to help people identify and change inaccurate perceptions that they might have of themselves and the world around them. They Psychologists are not licensed to prescribe medications. However, they can refer you to a psychiatrist if necessary. And some people will have multiple titles, which allows them to do multiple things, which I guess points back to what I was saying before, that a psychiatrist might do talk therapy and medication management. So some people will go to school for multiple things. So there are people who do both, but typically, or I guess these by themselves. I'm just explaining them by themselves. Um, so social worker is what I am, but I'm not an LCSW. So here we go with the all the letters. So I am an LMSW. So I'm a licensed master of social work. In the therapeutic atmosphere, an LCSW is a licensed clinical social worker. And they go through the same schooling I did, but beyond the test that I took, they get supervised by a licensed therapist, and they accumulate so many hours so that they are licensed to do therapy. So, but mostly same school of thought as psychology. They work under the similar umbrella. It's just the avenues of schooling that differ. Their goal is to enhance and maintain a person's psychological and social functioning. They work through the person and environment lens. So not only addressing the person that is in their office, but also considering the environment in which that they live and work, and that contributes to who they show up as in therapy. And then we have the licensed professional counselors. So these are LPCs. So they're required by state licensure laws to have at least a master's degree in counseling. And then they have 3,000 hours of post master's experience. And it's this similar situation. They're supervised under somebody who is fully licensed, and then they work their way towards being fully licensed themselves. Um, Another title that isn't listed on the slide, but another alphabet soup that you might see after someone's name, is LMFT, and that's a licensed marriage and family therapist. So these are all just things to keep in your back pocket when you are seeking out therapy, because while people can point you in the right direction, a lot of counselors and therapists, they have specializations. So if you're looking for a specific thing, while a lot of people offer it, there are people who specialize in it. So just keeping that in mind. Um, I just, like I said, wanted to bring this up just because, like I said, I get questions on the phones from people all the time. So I just want to communicate that it's normal to not understand what these things mean. It's more if you're in the field that these things would be relevant to you. But just keeping those things in mind as we move forward to the next step of the process. So now that you've recognized that you want to go to therapy, or you're considering maybe down the line that that's something you want to do, and you have some sort of idea of who does what, what's the next step, right? So the first step, in my eyes, and I feel like, just as I've been in the field for a while, it's that reaching out to your insurance provider. Um, Insurance is a difficult thing to navigate regularly. And when it comes to therapeutic services, it can get a little more difficult. Not to turn you away from it, but just to point it out to you. Um, the first step is really reaching out to your insurance company and seeing what they're willing to cover. And I say this because if you start to seek out therapy and they begin to cover the appointments and then they stop covering the appointments, this can be something that can be avoided because you will be aware of what they're willing to cover from the beginning. So that's why I put this at the beginning, just so you go into these conversations with some background information. A lot of the times there is a service limit, or like a session cap, that insurance providers will put on to covering sessions. So that's also important to note. And unfortunately, due to the caps, there might be a gap of services as well. So kind of maybe going to a place that takes your insurance, but at the same time, if insurance stops covering it and you are able or you and I guess what I'm trying to say is having affordable rates beyond insurance. So say if insurance backs out of covering, maybe going to a place that you are able to afford out of pocket might help as well. um, Another service that people have inquired with me often about is insurance covering psychoeducational evaluations that I was mentioning earlier, in order to diagnose your child with something like dyslexia, dysgraphia, or ADHD. And I just wanted to add this piece in here because this is something I've been doing for a lot of people, or trying to help people get connections to. And there are also psycho ed evals. I don't know about Humble ISD, but I know HISD has a school psychologist that conducts these evaluations in schools. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of students in these schools, and sometimes parents do not want to wait for that to occur. So getting outside services is always an option. But financially, evaluations are very expensive. What I have come to understand about evals is that most insurance companies will only cover them if you've reached the deductible that is on your insurance policy. So I just wanted to add that little piece in there. It's kind of a side tangent, but worth knowing. And so I'm sure some people are like, okay, well, what if I'm not going through insurance? And so that's our next slide. There, or if you are uninsured or choosing to not go through insurance, there's still plenty of options for you. So I just started with insurance, but I want to make sure and make very clear that that's definitely not the only option for therapeutic services. There are many places that will offer reduced rate, low cost, or sliding scale options. So those are three, flag words to kind of look out for. So it's reduced rate, low cost, and sliding scale. Many places will charge based on ability to pay. So you might need to provide some proof of your situation, such as like tax returns and the amount of people in your household, things like that. And there's also many therapy practices that have people working on their licenses on staff. And because they aren't fully licensed, they cannot charge the full rate of their license, like that they could charge upon the completion of their licensure. So that's very important to highlight, that you can possibly get very discounted services. And this is also a conversation around people's ability to be able to provide services if they are not fully licensed. So typically, there are a lot of providers and a lot of mental health providers that aren't fully licensed. There's a lot of people who are not fully licensed when they're doing the work. And that is just because they have to get so many hours before they can get their license. So I just want to point out that being able to go to a place where someone might not be fully licensed but getting a cheaper rate does not mean you are getting a service that is not worthy. It doesn't mean that they're not qualified. It just means that they're not legally allowed to charge the full limit, or the full fee, sorry, not limit, until they complete the required hours. There's also the option to go with private pay, which just means that you won't go through insurance and you'll pay full price out of pocket for the services. So again, all this information might seem like the process is already, I guess, becoming difficult, but like I said, this is just information to kind of keep in your back pocket while you're navigating this process, and just being aware of all of your options as you move forward. So we're going to move to the next slide.
Ashley, can I pause you for 1 second?
Yes.
So as you mentioned, I just kind of wanted to add a point, because you put up the different licenses, the LCSW, the LPC,
Yes.
LMFT, and then you mentioned not fully licensed. So I just wanted to mention out to everyone, what you'll see that show as is like LPC associate. So you still want to make sure that the providers that you're looking for are on a licensed track. And so what you'll see is it show up as LPC associate or LPCA, LMFT associate. Is LCSW associate as well? Is it the same, or is it intern?
Yeah, I think it's intern. Yeah.
Okay. And then for social workers, it's LCSW intern. So you still want to make sure, when you're looking for therapists and counselors, that you're looking for someone who is on a licensure track and someone that is on that process of being credentialed. And you'll be able to tell that because it's going to have those letters along with the term associate.
Thank you so much for noting that. That is definitely worthy. Okay, so now that we've discussed, the different titles of people who'll be offering services, how you go about paying for this, the next step is really how to locate a therapist. So there are so many therapists in Houston. Since we live in a highly populated area, some people would view it as a pro and a con, but personally, I think it's a pro, especially after seeking out services for people who live in rural areas. There aren't a lot of options, which is super unfortunate. But here in Houston, we have so many providers to choose from. But because of that, having a lot of providers, it can be overwhelming because there's so many people to choose from. So, like I said, it is a pro and a con in that way. um in adult and child therapy, there's many types of therapy and theories that are supported by different therapists. So don't let that turn you away from seeking out services, because you don't need to understand everything that they practice, but having a general idea of these things is important, which is why I brought up the other things that I brought up. But my favorite place to go to find therapy or therapeutic services is Psychology Today. So it's basically a website phone book of all the therapists in your area. It is just a database that goes through all the things. You can look up based on zip code, you can look up based on need, insurance provider, and you can honestly do all those at the same time, so that you're not having to look at every therapist and say, do they have my insurance, do they cover what I need? Those things are listed on there for you. They have their address, their phone number, all that stuff in one spot. Each therapist has a bio on their profile, and some have even a video that you can watch that will give you kind of a way to put a name to a face. And I like the profiles that have videos, because it just allows you to see that person talking and that they're a real person. um, and like I said, you can filter out by insurance provider, the age of the person you're seeking services for, and all that. So while I'm saying that, and a lot of therapists are qualified to do work with a vast population of people. Some therapists like to keep their focus very slim. So it's just important to look at, do they specialize in children? Do they work with adults? And that is all listed on their profile as well. Um, your primary care physician is also a good place to start for referrals. Many doctors' offices keep a list on file of places to refer out to and places that they work with pretty regularly. So that is a really awesome place to start. School counselors and social workers have lists of referral sources that they are able to pass on to you, from trusted professionals in the area. So they typically do networking and have good relationships with these people. So that's also a really awesome place to start. You can contact your insurance provider as well to get a list of the covered therapists in your area. And as I was creating this slideshow and creating this information, I saw a lot of random things just about making sure that you ask for a complete list of the therapists, because I guess that some insurance companies will give you a shorter list to not overwhelm you. But it is also important to get the entire list, so you're not having to contact them again and say, those didn't work. Can I have other ones? Just ask for the entire list of the providers. And then also, another helpful hint in this way is you can also look up business reviews for these psychological practices as well. Psychology Today doesn't link the website, unfortunately, which I get kind of annoyed with that. But you can just go to Google and type in their name, and their practice will come up, and you can look at their practice individually. So Psychology Today individually lists therapists, but multiple therapists work under one practice. So that's a way to kind of get the understanding of what the practice overall looks like. And then also, most, if not all, therapy centers and practices keep a list of referrals on file. So Heights Family Counseling keeps lists of referrals on file. If someone calls and they're like, or they need it covered by a certain insurance, we have lists of therapists that cover that, or that take that insurance, that we can refer out to you. So that's another great place to start. And yeah, a lot of people, they're very generous in referring out. You have kind of gathered a list of people that you think might be good fits. it is important to do work beyond that, because therapy is a process that whether you or your child are going through this, it is important that the relationship meshes well. um, I like to think of finding a therapist as comparable to a job interview, except you're interviewing them for the position as your therapist. So, like I said at the beginning, they are there to serve you, right? So, you are interviewing them to see if they are a good fit for you or your child. Um, Most therapists offer a phone consultation, so a 15-minute phone consultation that you should and take advantage of. This is when you are able to kind of discuss your concerns, what brings you to therapy, and then they have the opportunity to express to you if it would be a good fit or not. And this is worth highlighting here as well. Just because a therapist tells you that you might not be a good fit for them, it's not that they don't want you as a client. It's just that their specialization might not be in the area that you are looking for. So don't let that offend you. It's just that they want to provide the best services that they can, as well as you want to find the best services that you're looking for. So they sometimes might say, I don't think this is a good fit based on my background, and sometimes refer you out from there as well. Um, Also, if they feel like based on your concerns that a particular type of therapy might be useful to you, they might also recommend this during this time. So as I was saying before, there are different types of therapies that you don't necessarily need to know top to bottom. And then in these consultations, you might you might get a better idea just from talking to therapists. They might say, oh, that sounds like this might be good for your child, or what have you. Um, Also, during these consultations, kind of pay attention to how your concerns are addressed with the potential therapist. You want to watch out for therapists who kind of just like agree with everything you say in an attempt to gain a client. So, if a therapist is having a hard time getting clients, they might just take on anybody. And you want to be kind of watchful for just like over agreeing, like, oh, yeah, definitely, I can take care of that. I can take care of that, without hearing you out. Um, it's not very common, but it is just important to keep an eye out for that, because you want to find a perfect fit for you. And you can't do that if you are, engaging in that type of therapeutic process where they're not meeting you or they're at, but more or less like seeking out a paycheck. And I hate to say that, and like I said, it doesn't happen often, but just being aware of that. Also, keep in mind that experience does not guarantee a good fit. So, like I was saying earlier, with people who are associates, as Tiffany had mentioned, that doesn't mean that they are unable to provide quality services to you. It used to be kind of like the more time you've spent in the field, the more qualified you are to serve your clients. And while that might be true for some, sometimes when people have been practicing for a long time, they might not keep as up to date with like newer processes or newer research. And so, not to say that people with a lot of experience won't be of use, but all I'm saying is that newer people in the field, they just got out of school, they've been in training, they're fresh. So that doesn't make them not qualified, just like having many years of experience doesn't keep you, or doesn't overqualify you either. Sorry, my doorbell is ringing. And also, because we live in an area with so many therapists, there's no reason that we need to settle for something that you feel might not be a good fit. You're kind of looking for that X factor, that sense of being seen and heard. And this is personal to each person. This is also what can make the process a difficult one, but it's worth kind of going through a few of those consultations and getting nailed down what it is that you're looking for. And also, part of finding a good therapist, or a therapist that is a good fit for you, also requires a level of self disclosure. For some people, that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but in order for a therapist to know if they're a good fit for you, you do have to disclose some information just surrounding what it is that you're dealing with, so that they can best address your needs and know whether or not they're a good fit for you. um Ask a lot of questions, ask as many questions as you can think of. There's nothing wrong with that. Go into these conversations with kind of an idea of what you want to say and how you want to go about presenting the information that you would like to share. And ask the potential therapist what their experience is, working with children. Like I said, you're interviewing them, so you can get as much out of it as you can. Like I said, many therapists have specialties, or kind of like their preferred client. So it's important for you to know what work it is that they do and feel comfortable doing. And like I said, most of it is listed on Psychology Today, but you can also ask this in the consultations or through phone calls. And like I said, pay attention to the response of the therapist. Like, are they validating you? Are they agreeing with everything you're saying? Do they seem to have knowledge in your area of concern? Just kind of pay attention to the way that they're responding to you. Also, feel free to share with the therapist what has not worked for you in the past. If you might have sought out therapeutic services or gone to a social skills group or something of that nature where you realize something really did not work for you, definitely communicate that in your consultation so you can kind of get a better idea and they can get a better idea of what it is you're looking for. And also, I brought up earlier the different methodologies that therapists might use that might be listed on Psychology Today. So I kind of just wanted to go over one or two of them just so you can, like I said before, with the like low rate, reduced fee, sliding scale, like being like flagged words, these might be words that you might see in therapist bios that you can have a better idea of and just know that you're what you're getting into, I guess. So a lot of therapists base their um knowledge, or I guess their approach, that's the word I was looking for, sorry, that escaped me for a second, um on CBT. So this is cognitive behavioral therapy. And in CBT, you work on identifying patterns and learning more about how they might negatively affect you. With your therapist's guidance, you'll explore ways to replace negative thought patterns or behaviors with ones that are more helpful and accurate. So that is a pretty well known and very used approach to therapy. Another one is the humanistic approach, which looks at your worldview and how it affects the choices you make, especially choices that cause you distress. And it's based in the belief that you're your best person, like you're the best person that understands your experiences and needs. So those are just two random ones that might pop up and are very frequently used. And so these approaches are just the lens in which your therapy or your therapist is viewing the therapeutic process. So it doesn't really put any weight on you or give any responsibility to you. It's just the way that they're viewing the therapeutic process at large. There is quite a bit of crossover. A lot of it, while some therapists might, you know, use cognitive behavioral therapy, they also might come from the humanistic approach in other situations. So it's just a good to understand kind of what that means in these biographies that you're reading on Psychology Today, and as you're talking to potential therapists in the consultations, they might bring up their train of thought as well. So I talked about the consultations, and schedule a few. Don't just commit to one. It's okay to talk to multiple and kind of just let them know, like, hey, I am talking to a few. I'll get back to you whenever I come up with a decision. You don't, just because you're booking on consultation doesn't mean you need to commit and make a decision then and there. And I think that that's important to acknowledge, because when you're on the phone with somebody and they're like, okay, yeah, do you want to book with me today? You definitely have to like just stand your ground and let them know, like, hey, yeah, I am talking to other people. It's okay to do that. I mean, they're not trying to sell you something. Like, it's okay to walk away. I know I personally am terrible at that sometimes, so I kind of have to like talk myself up about that, and that's why I just wanted to bring that up, is that there's nothing wrong with saying that you're talking to multiple people. And once you have started therapy, you can also reevaluate the relationship. So say you have committed to one, your child or you are going, and you realize, this is not a good fit. That is also perfectly okay. You don't want to continue to seek out a service that is not beneficial to you. And also, therapists are not going to be offended. Not everybody is going to be your perfect fit, and that's perfectly okay. And you might think that at the beginning of the process that they are a good fit, and over time you just realize that they're not. And that process can be a little bit, or kind of set you back in the sense of feeling like defeated and feeling like, maybe I shouldn't have done this to begin with. But I just wanted to point that out, because it's important that that doesn't shy you away from continuing to get the help that you need or the help that your child needs, because obviously you sought out the services for a reason to begin with. So it's just important to make sure you know that you can reevaluate your decision about your therapist and choose a different one. It's okay to change your mind. You're not tied to them. Sorry, I totally got sidetracked with telling you to click through, but yeah, sorry about that. um, but yeah, just making sure that you solidify your therapist and you do everything in your power to make sure that you are getting the needs that you need. And like I said, or you're getting your needs met. And like I said at the beginning, the people that work in the mental health field are here to serve you. So you have to be the controller of that situation and speaking out when things might not be of service to you. So I think that that is the last slide before the recap, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I put my contact information on here. I know I included it somewhere. So if anyone has any questions that they wanted to send to me directly and didn't feel comfortable putting in the Q&A, feel free to shoot me an email. But today we kind of just we went through the acknowledgement of being able to say you want to go to therapy, or this might be something in your near future, and I just wanted to applaud you guys for that decision. And I think that it is a beautiful thing to just kind of acknowledge those gaps in service and kind of say, you know, I do need help in this way. My child is showing up like this and I don't know what to do, and that's perfectly okay. I'm just really happy that you guys are here and that you wanted this information to begin with. We also covered, you know, understanding the different people and titles who offer therapeutic services and kind of having an idea of what that looks like. So we're not calling for therapy and asking for a psychiatrist, right? So just knowing the differences between the different titles. Understanding how to financially navigate paying for therapy. So we talked about if you're deciding to go through insurance, just reaching out to your insurance company, seeing what they're willing to cover. Even like I said, reaching out to them for providers as well, because they offer that information, but just kind of having an idea of how to go about that. And then also, if you're not going through insurance, like I said, there's so many options for how to pay for therapy and what that looks like. And like I said, reduced rate, sliding scale, low cost, all these things are available, because therapy should be available to everybody, no matter what of financial standing. Um, we also talked about how to find a therapist of your liking and what that journey looks like. So I feel like I've said this statement, like I said, multiple times. So everyone just, I apologize for that. But like I said, there's multiple avenues that you can go through to get information about therapists and who is available in your area based on zip code. Like I said, Psychology Today, reaching out to your school, reaching out to your primary care physicians, reaching out to your insurance providers, and also reaching out to local therapy practices. Even if you see that they might be private pay, but you're looking to be covered by insurance, call the private pay therapy practice and say, hey, do you have any referrals for Blue Cross Blue Shield? And 9 times out of 10, they will. So that's a perfectly fine avenue to go down. And I, okay, yeah, so we went through everything. And like I said, you're interviewing them, asking questions, booking consultations, and just really using all the resources that you can to make that process a fluent one for you, and just avoiding barriers that sometimes come up in therapy. I guess that's the main purpose of, or in seeking out therapy. And that was the main purpose of us meeting today. So I hope that this information was helpful to everybody.
Hi, Ashley. I have a question that I was hoping maybe you can address for, because maybe they don't know what to ask. One of the questions that comes up is different types of how counseling is provided, like individual, group. Are you able to kind of explain what that looks like and how those services are offered?
Yeah, definitely. So in the therapeutic process, when I answer the phones at Heights Family Counseling and people say they want services, the first thing I ask is individual, couples, or for a minor. So those are you can have individual, there's couples, there's for like therapy for children, obviously, and in the group setting. And also with the age of COVID and everything, a lot of places are doing telehealth as well. So that is another option. There's telehealth or in-person services. And I'm glad you asked that, because what I've been seeing is a lot of places are still sticking to telehealth only. And some people really only want in-person services. So that's another thing that is listed on Psychology Today. It'll tell you that they're only doing telehealth. So if in-person is what you're looking for, that's something to keep an eye out for. But yeah, there's individual services and also groups. So there are multiple things that are, I guess, more beneficial in a group setting, social skills being one of them. So, like social skills groups. There's also a lot of, processing groups and support groups and things of that nature. And the benefit of group work as opposed to individual is the ability for our children to hear the point of view of other people and being able to understand how to navigate the words of other people and what that looks like, and also understanding that you're not alone in what you deal with. So if there is a specific concern and there's a group that addresses that, groups are also really great for that reason, in helping people not feel alone in their therapeutic process. So therapy definitely is not just a one-on-one situation. It can take place in the group setting, and there's a lot of benefits from groups compared to individuals. And there's a lot of cases where sometimes people will benefit from individual counseling at first and then move their way to a group, and in that they can receive the validation of, I'm not in this battle alone, and this is something that other people deal with outside of myself. So I hopefully that encompassed the question entirely.